Have you ever noticed how loud the world is? Everyone's speaking. Everyone's reacting. Everyone wants to be right. But the truth? The one with the loudest voice usually knows the least. We live in a culture obsessed with expression. Explain yourself. Defend yourself. React or they win. But here's a question you rarely ask. What happens when you stop playing their game? What if silence isn't weakness? What if it's a weapon? Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." But how do you know your own darkness? Not by arguing with those who live in theirs. Not by screaming into the void, begging to be understood. You meet your darkness in the quiet, in the stillness, in the silence. Silence is not the absence of power. It is its concentration. Think about it. When you're silent after betrayal, it terrifies them. When you walk away without explanation, it haunts them. When you no longer defend yourself, they start questioning themselves. You want revenge? Disappear. You want peace? Detach. You want to rise? Be still. The people who truly hold power in any room, they aren't the loudest. They're the most self-contained. The ones who don't react just because someone provoked them. The ones who choose their silence like a scalpel. But let's be honest, that's not easy, because everything in you wants to speak, to justify, to prove them wrong. You want them to know what they lost. You want them to understand how deeply they hurt you. You want to yell, "I mattered." But here's the brutal truth. If they didn't see your value then, your words now won't teach them. Your silence will. Silence leaves a hole, an echo. It forces people to sit with themselves. And most people can't. They crave noise because noise distracts from truth. Your silence? It's a mirror. It reflects what they refuse to face. They don't miss your voice. They miss the control they had when you used it to please them. So stop thinking you need to explain your boundaries. Stop believing you owe anyone closure. You don't. Closure is not something they give you. It's something you give yourself when you stop chasing their validation. Most people won't get it. They'll say you're cold. They'll call you distant. They'll accuse you of being dramatic. Let them. You don't need to defend your healing. You don't need to justify your peace. You don't need to apologize for choosing silence over chaos. Because silence is not emptiness. Silence is full of answers. It's in silence that you hear the truth whisper. It's in silence that you realize who never deserved access to you. It's in silence that you remember. Your value is not up for debate. Your truth doesn't need to be shouted. And your power? It doesn't need permission to exist. So the next time your instincts scream to react, to write that text, to post that story, to explain why you walked away, breathe, pause. Remember, silence is strength. Silence is strategy. Silence is survival. And in the quiet, you don't disappear. You return to yourself. Have you ever noticed how quickly you respond? A comment, a look, a post, a tone, and you snap. Why? Because reaction feels like power. But it isn't. It's a trap, a cage, one you walk into willingly. When someone disrespects you, what do? You reply. You explain. You argue. You try to win. But what if winning isn't about proving them wrong? What if winning is about not playing their game at all? Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Yet instead of reflecting, we react. Instead of understanding, we attack. Instead of observing, we bleed emotion everywhere." And that's what they want. The crowd, the noise, the manipulators. They want you reactive. They want you impulsive. Because if you can't control your emotions, someone else will. Let's be honest. You've reacted to people who didn't deserve your time. You've explained yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You've given away peace in the name of pride. That's not power. That's slavery. Emotional slavery. And most people live there. They're addicted to reaction. Their nervous system is on fire, waiting for the next insult, the next trigger, the next opportunity to say, "See, I was right." But rightness isn't freedom. Silence is. Not the silence of fear. The silence of choice. The silence that says, "I see you. I see the game. I'm just not playing." There is something terrifyingly powerful about a man or woman who does not react, who hears everything, feels everything, but responds only to truth. Imagine someone insults you, and you say nothing. You just look and walk away. They expect a reaction. They feed off your rage, your defense, your rebuttal. But when you choose silence, you deny them the meal. That is power, not because you're weak, but because you're so strong You don't need to fight battles that don't matter. Think of all the times you tried to correct someone who didn't want to understand you. You explained, you defended, you typed paragraphs, and they never changed. Why? Because you weren't talking to them. You were reacting to your own wound, your own need to be seen. But not everyone deserves access to your mind, to your time, to your explanation. You don't owe anyone your reaction. You owe yourself your peace. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And most of what happens to you isn't personal. It's projection. People see you through the lens of their own pain. So they insult, they diminish, they provoke, because they want to transfer the chaos within them onto you. And the moment you react, you carry it. Reaction is the handoff of poison, and silence is refusing to drink. Ask yourself, how many arguments could you have avoided by just walking away? How many relationships could you have ended with dignity if you just stayed silent? How much mental energy have you wasted trying to control what people think of you? Here's the brutal truth. People will think what they want, no matter what you say. So say less, mean more. You don't have to tweet about it. You don't have to post about it. You don't have to comment on it. You just have to know who you are. That's where reaction ends, at the doorstep of self-awareness. Because when you know who you are, you don't chase approval. You don't beg to be understood. You don't fight to be seen. You become still. Stillness is not passivity. Stillness is mastery. Stillness is the refusal to let the world dictate your inner state. Think of water. Still water reflects perfectly, but when disturbed, it distorts. Your reaction is the ripple, and most of your suffering comes from that distortion, not from the event itself. So stop rippling. Start seeing. Yes, someone was rude. Yes, someone was unfair. Yes, zomion elite. But your power is in your response, not your outrage. Don't give it away. Not again. Every time you react, you surrender. Every time you hold your center, you rise. So next time you feel the urge to reply, to snap, to defend, pause, breathe, watch. You are not their puppet, and silence is your scissors. Remember this. The loudest person in the room usually feels the weakest. But the one who says nothing, the one who walks away, the one who lets time speak for them, that person owns the room. Don't react. Don't explain. Just disappear. Let your absence speak volumes. Let your silence echo. Let your restraint be your revolution. Because in a world that screams for attention, disengagement is divine. Reaction is a cage. Silence is the key. Choose wisely. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to explain yourself? To try and put your soul into sentences? To convince someone of your worth, your intent, your truth, when they were never really listening to begin with? Why do you do it? Why do you feel the need to be understood by everyone? You don't owe the world your explanation. Not your boss. Not your ex. Not strangers with assumptions dressed as opinions. And yet, you speak. You over-explain. You justify your silence, your anger, your distance. You try to make them see you. But here's the brutal truth. Most people don't want to understand you. They want to fit you into their narrative, their boxes, their rules. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become when you're constantly explaining why you're not? Why you didn't show up? Why you left? Why you stopped responding? Why you chose yourself? Justification is bondage. It's spiritual debt. You feel like you owe clarity to people who never gave you safety. That's not honesty. That's fear. You're afraid to be misunderstood. Afraid to be the villain in someone else's story. Afraid that silence will make them think less of you. Let them. You can't control what someone else is ready to understand. And every time you try, you shrink. You dilute yourself for people who were never supposed to hold you in the first place. You think your words will free you, but sometimes they only build another prison. Because when you speak to prove, to explain, to fix their perception, you're not speaking from power. You're speaking from pain. And pain never sounds convincing. It sounds defensive. It sounds desperate. Think about the last time you sent that long text. You poured your heart out. And what did you get? Silence. Dismissal. Or worse, mockery. Now you feel embarrassed. Because you gave access to someone who only wanted control. Here's the truth. Some people question you not to understand you, but to destabilize you. To see if you'll betray yourself to win their approval. Don't fall for it. You're not here to audition. You're not a proposal waiting for a signature. You're not a truth waiting to be validated. You are valid in silence. You are justified by existing. And yet, This world teaches you the opposite. It makes you believe that being understood is the same as being loved. It's not. Some will love you and never understand you. Others will understand and still choose to leave. The ones who matter, they feel your truth without you saying a word. But for that to happen, you have to stop bleeding explanations. You have to stop offering clarity like an apology. What if you didn't respond? What if you let the misunderstanding sit? What if you allowed people to make their assumptions and moved on anyway? Do you know what that's called? Freedom. Because your energy is sacred. Your peace is sacred. And sometimes silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of self-respect. People think silence is weakness, but it's not. Silence is power. It unsettles. It reveals. It protects. In silence, your enemies show themselves. In silence, your priorities return. In silence, your truth gathers its voice. You don't need to explain your healing. You don't need to explain your growth. You don't need to explain your absence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Because if they needed an explanation to value you, they never truly valued you. If they required defense to believe in your heart, they never really trusted you. So stop justifying. Start walking. Not with arrogance, with clarity. You are not running away. You are releasing the weight. You are stepping into a life where you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You are choosing the path that doesn't demand constant performance. You are choosing peace over proving. You are choosing self over spectacle. That's not selfish. That's liberation. So the next time someone demands your explanation, give them silence. Not out of spite, but out of strength. Because you're not here to beg for understanding. You're here to embody truth. And truth doesn't explain. It just is. And that is enough. Have you ever walked away without a word and felt like the world mistook your silence for surrender? Have you ever disappeared from someone's life, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because staying would have meant betraying yourself? This world doesn't understand that kind of silence. Because in this world, everything must be explained, labeled, justified. But you left without applause, without drama, without needing to be seen. And that took strength. Let me say something that no one told you. Disappearance is not weakness. It is clarity. It is sovereignty. It is self-respect. Carl Jung said, "Solitude is not the absence of love, but its complement." What does that mean? It means that sometimes loving yourself means walking away. Even when they call you cold. Even when they beg you to explain. Even when they say, "How could you?" Because you know what staying would have cost. Most people stay to prove something. You left to protect something. Your peace, your truth, your soul. Let me ask you, why do we romanticize fighting to be understood? Why do we think that love is only real if it survives our pain? Why do we think that vanishing from toxicity is weakness? It's not. It's the highest form of strength. But the world doesn't teach that. The world teaches. Explain yourself. Prove you were right. Fight to be seen. Here's the truth. Sometimes the highest form of strength is not fighting, not fixing, not explaining. Sometimes it's closing the door. Quietly, finally, and never looking back. Because silence is not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of self. Most people aren't strong enough to leave without making noise. They need to be the victim. They need to be understood. But not you. You disappeared because you knew the conversation was over. Even if they were still yelling. You disappeared because no explanation would heal a connection built on illusion. You disappeared because you refused to keep bleeding just to prove you were hurt. That's not weakness. That's power. You turned inward. You reclaimed your energy. You chose your dignity over your narrative. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because silence holds a mirror. It shows them what they didn't want to see. The emptiness of their noise. The weakness in their drama. The dependence in their demands. You became a ghost not to haunt them, but to free yourself. Freud said, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." But what if expression isn't performance? What if it's action? What if it's walking away? No announcement, no closure, no eulogy for something that was already dead. They wanted a final scene. You gave them stillness. That's not weakness. That's transformation. You became ungovernable. You became invisible to their manipulations. You became untouchable. Most people can't stand that kind of energy because it reminds them of what they lack. Center, courage, conviction. But you left the battlefield. And in doing so, You won a war no one else saw. You won the right to be whole, to be quiet, to be at peace. And maybe they still talk about you. Maybe they still wonder what happened. Maybe they still try to bait you back. But you don't bite, because you know the cost. You know the game, and you're done playing. Disappearance is not erasure. It's evolution. It's the moment when you stop proving and start being. When you stop reacting and start living. It's not about revenge. It's about release. It's about saying, I don't need your apology to heal. I don't need your understanding to move on. I don't need your permission to be free. You don't disappear to hurt anyone. You disappear because you refuse to keep hurting yourself. And one day, if they ever become honest enough to reflect, they'll understand. But even if they don't, you're already gone, already risen, already untouchable. So let them misunderstand. Let them fill in the silence with whatever stories they need to sleep at night. You don't owe them the truth. You owe it to yourself. You are not weak. You are not cruel. You are not broken. You are the storm that chose peace. You are the flame that chose stillness. You are the soul that chose itself. And in a world addicted to noise, that is the loudest thing you can ever do. Disappear, not to hide, but to return to your power, to your purpose, to your peace. Disappearance is not weakness. It is the beginning of your sovereignty and the end of their control. Let them wonder. Let them miss you. Have you ever noticed what happens when you stop speaking? Not in silence out of anger, not as manipulation, but when you simply walk away, without a word, without a scene, without a final monologue. They start to wonder, because silence is loud. And absence? It echoes. Let's be honest. The world is addicted to noise. Everyone explaining themselves, defending, posting, arguing, oversharing, constant justification. But the more you talk, the more you dilute your power. The more you try to convince, the more they tune you out. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He said, "A man who is not in control of himself will be controlled by others." And sometimes control doesn't mean force. It means restraint. It means choosing not to explain, not to react, not to beg for understanding. Instead, you vanish. You withdraw your energy. You become a mystery. And that's when something strange happens. You become unforgettable. Why? Because most people only miss the noise. They miss the validation. They miss the access. But when you disappear, they're left with themselves, with their guilt, with their memories, with the silence you left behind. That silence is your legacy. Let them replay your words. Let them guess your thoughts. Let them feel the absence of your presence like a wound they didn't expect to feel. Because they thought you'd always be there, that you'd always answer, that you'd always return. But this time you didn't. And in that space, they finally see your value. Not because you shouted, but because you stopped speaking. Not because you fought, but because you let go. Not because you proved them wrong, but because you no longer needed to. You see, strength isn't in confrontation. It's in elevation. You rise above. You walk away, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. You've seen enough. You've felt enough. And now you know. Your peace is more important than their closure. Your silence is not empty. It's full of lessons. It's full of boundaries. It's full of dignity. And when people can no longer access you, when they no longer get to hear your voice or receive your energy, they begin to understand the cost of what they lost. But by then it's too late, because you've grown, you've healed, you've moved on. You didn't disappear to teach them a lesson, but your absence became one anyway. You didn't need revenge, because your evolution was enough. So let them wonder, let them question, let them sit in the silence they never expected. That's your power now. You no longer explain, you no longer chase. You simply walk away, and in doing so, you become unforgettable.